Somebody predicted on the Patreon feed that this was going to be an extra good broadcast today. And, you know, I wouldn't have said that about 45 minutes ago, but today and now it's definitely true. So welcome to Resistance Live. It's May Day. It's the 1st of May, 2025. Shout out to all unionized and working people today on a very significant day. Also, for those of you who are visually challenged today, I am wearing a V-neck, I don't know, cream-colored sweater. My hair is down. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in front of my bookshelf and my cart, and I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. Okay, so the last hour of news has been quite a bit, okay? So we have to start with the first bit of breaking news, which is that Mike Waltz, former representative in Congress, they gave up a seat for this, right? I mean, of course, they filled it with a Republican, unfortunately. But Mike Waltz and his deputy, Alex Wong, are out as national security advisors. This is a really big deal, actually. This is the first major shakeup of this administration, and it is largely predicted at this point to be resulted from SignalGate. We don't really know. Like, there hasn't been like a rationale given by the administration, but it was quite plainly unexpected because as recently as an hour before his firing was announced, he was on Fox News defending the president. So this is kind of an interesting moment because I'm going to say something else about this. I'm not sure this is the end of this story. There's quite a bit of deep concern about Pete Hegseth. Now that we know that there have been two chats, and I will just say, not in a kind of I told you so moment, but, you know, I warned you all that when Trump does this thing of one of his people does something really terrible, and then he's asked by the press what he's going to do about it. And if he's behind that person, he says he's totally behind them until like a week later when they're gone. And this was a regular habit during the first administration. I would not be surprised to see Hegseth under fire for this in the coming days. But this is a very significant moment. And, you know, to make matters, because you can't make this shit up, to make matters a little bit worse, the person who is under consideration to replace him is Steve Witkoff, for whom there was just a breaking news piece yesterday about how he's already been a special envoy to the president. He's been negotiating on like Russia and Iran. There was some breaking news for yesterday in which colleagues of his anonymously referred to him as a bubbling effing idiot. And he is now in line potentially to be the next national security advisor. So it's kind of a wild day, you know, but that's not even the latest breaking news. All right. The latest breaking news, which is very, 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 very good. Okay. And this comes after the release yesterday of the student organizer, Mr. Madawi. We talked about this yesterday in Vermont, who was released by a federal judge there for having been wrongfully detained. He's a green card holder, never should have been picked up by ICE, was denied due process, and was immediately released by a federal judge in Vermont. Well, literally just about 25 minutes ago, a federal judge in Texas, I mean, again, let's just think about that. A federal judge in Texas, and who is, wait for it, a Trump appointee, not only certified a class of Venezuelan migrants to proceed against the Trump administration on the basis of the Alien Enemies Act executive order, but then ruled that the executive order was unlawful, granted habeas corpus for the three named plaintiffs who will be released, and ruled that there is now a permanent injunction preventing the Trump administration from applying the executive order to any currently designated Venezuelan migrants or any Venezuelan migrant who they may choose to designate as an alien enemy from being deported under the executive order. This ruling is huge. I mean, it's kind of like stunning. And I'm sure they're going to appeal it right away to the Fifth Circuit, and it will make its way to the Supreme Court in short order. But I'm going to tell you something. The Supreme Court has already 7-2 tried to stop Trump from applying the AEA. And so I think this one, while it may be overturned by the Fifth Circuit, because the Fifth Circuit is currently the most conservative circuit court of appeals in the country, is unlikely to be overturned by the Supreme Court. And so I'm just going to say I think this is a very, very, very good day. And the thing I have to remind you all of, and this is one reason why I've been riding this thing so hard of not saying all hope is lost, not saying the rule of law is dead, because it's not. And, again, as I keep saying here all the time, we never know what's going to happen day to day. I don't think anybody a month ago would have predicted that a Trump-appointed judge in Brownsville, Texas, the Southern District of Texas, which, by the way, is the district where they have been sending migrants for deportation. Every single person who ended up in CCOT in El Salvador went through that district. This is where they have the enormous detention camps that have been housing, migrants, anybody they pick up. They've been placing them there or in Louisiana. And if they're plotting to deport them, they all go through this district in Texas. It's unbelievable. Nobody would have guessed a month ago that this was likely. Nobody would have predicted that a Trump-appointed judge would have done this. So again, I just have to tell you that, from where we sit, day in and day out right now, again, we've got 2 consecutive days of this, and we've got literally several dozen rulings out of the federal courts right now that are stopping the Trump administration in its tracks. Now, does that mean that they're not going to try to find ways to weasel out of it? Of course they are. But I got to tell you, this is really good. It's really good and really significant. And the opinion itself is incredibly well written. It's very long. I skimmed it. I only had time to skim it before we came on the air. But it's grounded in the background of the Alien Enemies Act. And it says explicitly that the Trump administration does not have the authority under the Alien Enemies Act to do what they're doing with regard to this class of migrants. So it's really great. And, the other thing is that while a ruling from a district court judge in the Southern District of Texas, it's not controlling authority over any other federal court. It certainly is persuasive authority. So cases that are being brought in other districts, those judges could look to this decision and say, we actually agree with what this judge has done. This particular judge is Fernando Rodriguez. Man, I'm not pronouncing things well today. Rodriguez. And this ruling may be referred to by other judges as being well-reasoned or rational if other classes or individuals bring cases to stop their deportation under the Alien Enemies Act. Now, this applies to only Venezuelan migrants. I want to make this really clear. It's not anybody they decide to pick up. But all that said, it is a ruling that holds on principle that this EO invoking the Alien Enemies Act is unlawful. And that in and of itself is the first time that we have seen that explicit of a conclusion on the basis of the history of the Alien Enemies Act. So really, really big day. I'm super pleased about this. And I frankly think that we all should be celebrating. All right. We had wind of this. What happened first was that he certified the class, which was in and of itself a little bit surprising. And then the ruling came minutes later. So just a great day, and nobody was really kind of expecting it. So I'm thrilled. I will also just note, I know many of you are in the streets or headed into the streets. I just got a text message from a friend of mine who's a lawyer in New York who's heading down to Foley Square to protest as a part of a lawyers event today. But it's May Day, and there are protests happening everywhere. So if you want to get involved, I want to remind you all, I said it yesterday, I'll say it again. Go to mobilize.us. Figure out what's going on where you live. Here where I live, there's all sorts of things going on between 3 and 6 o'clock. You should show up. It's a good day to show up. Okay, so we have to talk about a couple of other things. So there was a lot of panic yesterday about a bill that was advanced out of committee in the House of Representatives. It is a bill that essentially says that the administration, now this is just a bill, okay? I'm going to explain how this all works in a minute for those who have forgotten Schoolhouse Rock. This is advanced out of committee, a bill that says that the Trump administration can detain anyone suspected of being in the country illegally with or without a warrant, with or without any form of due process. Now, it doesn't say the due process part explicitly, but it does say that they can be detained on administrative, civil, or criminal grounds, which essentially means if there's an administrative determination or an administrative warrant that says this person is in the country illegally or we suspect they are, that person can be picked up, detained, and deported. Now, a lot of panic in the Patreon feed about this morning, and I want to just explain this to everyone really clearly, okay? The bill was in committee. It has now been voted out of committee. It will go to the floor of the House of Representatives if it is permitted to for a full vote, okay? Then it has to go to the floor of the Senate. And the Senate would have to vote in favor of it if nobody invokes, once again, the dreaded filibuster, which, like, by the way, the Democrats have as a tool in their pockets and they should be using more, okay? Only if it passes the Senate and it goes to Donald Trump's desk will it then become law, okay? And then something else happens, okay? So let's just say hypothetically the worst case scenario happens. This horrifically written thing that says if we even suspect you of not being a U.S. citizen or in the country unlawfully, we get to detain you, deport you without due process, okay? Let's just say hypothetically that becomes a law. It will be immediately challenged on constitutional grounds. Like, I'm not joking, within like minutes, there will be lawsuits filed on that basis that will seek to stop it as unconstitutional. And because due process is required by the Supreme Court, there is a strong possibility that the law itself will be stopped on that basis alone. Okay, so I have to remind you all, one of the things that is true about checks and balances and the separation of powers in this country is this, okay? Just because Congress passes a law and the president signs it doesn't make that law constitutional. What actually has to happen thereafter is that if there's a challenge in court to the constitutionality of it, that has to be litigated in the courts. So, for instance, let's just say hypothetically that there is a law passed in the country that says you have permission to discriminate against all Christian people. Let's just say that hypothetically. We'll take something that's never going to happen under the Trump administration. It's totally okay to engage in religious discrimination against Christian people. If that ever became the law of the land, that law would never go into effect because it would be deemed unconstitutional. This bill is exactly the same. Now, do we need to be concerned about the fact that it actually made it out of committee? Well, it kind of tells us something. It tells us that the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee are all in for Trump. And I just have to kind of like have a moment of clarity on this because there was a question on the Patreon feed this morning. Reminder, you can become a paid subscriber for as little as $5 a month if you want to ask me questions and have me answer them on the air. One person on the Patreon feed this morning said, what compromise does the Trump administration have on all these Republican representatives? I just have to point out to all of you, they don't. This is not a situation where like the entire GOP in the House is being blackmailed. Like they're all in. It's a fascist party. There is no GOP left. They're all MAGA. There's like very, very limited exceptions to that. So this is an indication of where they are. And they literally just voted that essentially like if you're a U.S. citizen and somebody says, well, that person might not be here legally, you can be detained and deported. That's not really a great sign for what the GOP stands for. But nonetheless, in the very unlikely event that this gets voted up by both the House and the Senate and signed into law by Donald Trump, it will be stopped in the courts. And I know that there's lots of people, again, this is one reason why I said at the top of the broadcast, this thing is driving me crazy, who are going to say like, oh, the courts aren't doing their jobs. The courts actually are doing their jobs. They're doing their jobs. They're doing them actually quite well right now, way better than many of us expected. And the other thing that I think is becoming very, very clear right now is that the federal judiciary understands at this point, most of the federal judiciary understands at this point exactly what's at stake, including a large majority of the Supreme Court. So I'm feeling like we're kind of in decent shape on that one. And again, this is one of those moments where I have to like kind of dial back the panic for some of you, because as I have said many times now, and we talked about with regard to executive orders earlier in the week, please remember, okay, that just because some horrible thing is being signaled doesn't mean it's actually going to come to pass or go into effect. All right. And this is an instance where I know Eric Swalwell walked out and immediately did like a broadcast from the hallway of the House of Representatives office building, where he talked about how he couldn't believe that Republicans had voted for U.S. citizens to be able to be deported. Yes, it's horrible, but also it's not the law. And one of the things that I think is really critical right now is that when you see something like that, you have to automatically ask yourself the question, is this actually a threat right now? And maybe it's just signaling some information about the GOP or the people on that committee that are relevant to you. But the thing that you don't have to be worried about right now at least not if you're like, not somebody who is already on a target list, is that, immediately you are going to be rounded up and deported. Okay. So one of the things that I want people to really consider in this news era, particularly when you see something that feels outrageous, is this an immediate threat? And we talked about this with regard to the EO about weaponizing police forces on Tuesday rather. Like, there's not any immediate threat from that. It's not a declaration of martial law because, by the way, you can't even do that inside the United States. It would have to be the Insurrection Act. But nonetheless, it's not an immediate threat. And yet people were running around like their hair was on fire, right? Just in the same way that this is not an immediate threat. Okay. And I frankly think it's very unlikely that this is going to be voted up by the House and the Senate. Never say never, but I think it's very, very, very unlikely. Okay. So we shall see. Okay. A lot of scandal has been made about Trump's $2 comment yesterday. If you missed it in the middle of a cabinet meeting, which is really more of an ass kissing of Donald Trump, generally speaking, he made a comment about how the state of the tariffs was such that now instead of having $30 at Christmas, I don't know anybody who ever had $30 at Christmas, but whatever, or $30 to play with. Certainly wasn't me and my household when I was growing up. They'd now only have 2. And maybe those dolls would cost a little bit more, but we could suck it up and suffer. Okay. This comes on the back of another Trump official saying within the last few days that what needed to happen in this country was that there were generational factory jobs and that everybody went to work in a factory, and then your kids went to work in a factory, and then your grandkids went to work in a factory. And essentially there was no building of generational wealth, which, by the way, is a blowback to the company town model for coal mining, which is one of the foundational reasons why we have unions in this country, where there were literal union uprisings at Blair Mountain in West Virginia as a result of that, where people were murdered by our government for trying to stand up for not having to work 7 days a week and maybe not having to use company script, meaning you get paid in company money, not in real money, so that literally you can never leave. It's a form of fundamental indentured servitude. That's what they're signaling they want. And now he's let them eat dolls. That's essentially what this comment was yesterday. So I just want to be really clear with people, okay? The last ships of goods from overseas are entering the United States now, pre-tariff, okay? The tariffs have already started to take effect in many ways. There's been a lot of reposting screenshots in the last 24 hours of what's happening for online retailers, where those who are being honest are saying things like, there's a $700 tariff overcharge on this fancy winter coat that you're trying to buy because of the tariffs on overseas countries, right? Countries not the US. It's going to get really rough. And, the signaling about this has been very obvious, frankly, for the last few weeks. So Trump now knows that this is a problem. Plus, the stock market continues to plummet. And so he's essentially sending a message, and he had a Truth Social post about this yesterday also that was you better suck it up. That's kind of the message. Suck it up and, deal with it, plebes. That's kind of the message coming out of the administration at this moment. An economist, though, yesterday, whose name I'm now going to forget, which is really bad because I follow him on Blue Sky and he's brilliant, was on Deadline White House yesterday afternoon and gave an incredible interview about what this kind of an analogy actually translates to for American families. And what he said was, you're talking about an American family that, let's just say hypothetically, has $30,000 a year in income dropping to $2,000, or that their real wealth, right, the real amount of money that they have to spend on things drops from $300 to $20. So, again, when you put it in those terms, it's really very clear what we're up against. And he was also, quite plainly stating that essentially we're headed for recession, if not depression territory, if something isn't done. Now, I want to frame this out for all of you because I'm always, trying very hard to make sure that everybody in this audience is prepared. This is one of the things that we did when I was tracking everything that was happening in China around COVID in the fall and winter of 2019. And as a result, many of the people who were here were way better prepared for the quarantine phase of COVID than people who were suddenly taken by surprise. Okay. So I'm not a fan of panic buying, but I do want to let you all know that there are some things right now that are being signaled that will go scarce very quickly. For those of you with young kids and young grandkids, that's going to include things like over-the-counter medicine, basic clothes and shoes for kids. Okay. So remember that one of the things about the way that our supply chain works is that things come into the country and then there's like a 30 to 90 day window of sales for basic consumer goods. Okay. So stock up on that children's Tylenol. If your kids are in a growth spurt, buy them some new clothes for the fall now. I did this the other day. I just like went out and got one of those like 5-pack of shorts for my youngest because he's growing like a weed right now and I don't know where he's going to be. Bought him some, like a whole pack of t-shirts and a new set of socks. These are good things to do right now to be prepared. Also electronics. I mean, I hate to say it, but like, you know, you need a new phone, go get it like this week or next. You need like, you know, a small appliance for your kitchen, go get it this week or next, because it's going to be a very short window until those things start to become very difficult to get here. Okay. And that includes, by the way, batteries. They're flagging that batteries are going to be really tough to get. You can go to Costco and get one of those, like, you know, 48-pack of batteries and have them and they'll be fine. They have a shelf life of like 10 years. Those are things to think about. Moderate term, they are talking, I'm very sorry about this, about things like toilet paper and paper towels. They're also talking about other types of consumer goods. You know, although they say large appliances because the supply chain moves much slower, will probably be fine. Adult clothes, the supply chain moves much slower, will probably be fine. Basic household goods, detergent, things like, you know, cleaners for your kitchen. Those are things that we may also see start to become less available. As well, just have to mention this to everybody. If you are like a supplement and a vitamin person like I am, many of the raw ingredients for supplements and vitamins come in from overseas. So make sure you stock up because that's another thing that they're saying may not be available. I'm stocking up on children's vitamins for my kids and kind of like everything that I need. All right. So, you know, again, there are people already talking about how this is likely to impact us. Do not panic buy food. At least right now, the predictions are that the food supply chain is going to be largely fine because there is so much food being grown inside the United States. Now, if Trump were able to accomplish the mass deportations that he has predicted and wanted since he took office, we would be having a different conversation. The only thing that I'm seeing signaled right now that is in potential short supply is blueberries. Everything else seems to be functioning just fine. So don't panic buy food because the other thing is the supply chain is going to impact people's employment. Because one of the things that is expected to be in scarce supply before too long are things like nails and electric tools and things that we would need, for instance, in construction, some things that we may need in basic manufacturing. If those things are not available, jobs go away. Okay. So we want to make sure that everybody has enough to eat. And I truly recommend, by the way, that you don't overbuy food. Okay. Like, I have a freezer and it's full, but it's full all the time because I have like a teenager and a soon-to-be teenager, right? I don't feel the need right now to buy like, you know, a side of beef or something crazy because that would not be smart, all right? Right now, there's not a concern about food shortages for the remainder of the summer, okay? So be smart about this. And of course, if I get other news about this, because I'm getting all of this from people who are like supply chain experts, if I get any more news about this, I will share it here and you guys can have it because I want you all to be prepared. But please just be smart, okay? Like, don't panic buy. Don't buy more than you would need hypothetically within the next, let's call it 60 to 90 days. Oh, one other thing I should mention, dog food, dog medicine, dog toys, all of which are sourced with ingredients from China or overseas. I bought an extra like 60-pound bag of dog food just so I was sure that I would have enough for my dogs. But that's also something to kind of think about, all right? And pet food is definitely on the list. So I would stock up, Renee, if that's a concern for you, okay? So, you know, just know that there are some predictions that it's going to be, there are some things, not everything, you know, we don't need to like freak out, but there are some things that are likely to be scarce this summer because literally the supply that would have needed to come in for the next 30 to 90 days is now stopped. Just flat stopped. There's almost no tankers coming into like the port of Long Beach, the port of San Francisco, into Seattle, which is a huge port on the West Coast. Like it's just stopped because there's not, you know, companies cannot afford to buy these things with the tariffs incoming. All right. So just please know that if we're smart about this, we can be prepared and not panic and simultaneously make sure that our friends and neighbors have enough. All right. I also am just going to remind you all, it's a very good idea right now, if you have the capacity to do this, to make a donation to your local food bank, whether financial or in the form of food. Also, if you happen to live in a place where there's like a little food pantry available, we have a couple of them in my little city town here, go fill it up. You know, put a case of black beans in there, put some shelf-stable rice, so that people whose families are hungry can go there and get it for free without waiting in line in front of your food bank. Our food bank here has like lines that are like 40 people long when they're open. So please do that, okay? And, you know, make sure that your neighbors are okay. We've been talking about mutual aid for so long here, but I just have to remind you, Mutual Aid Hub, you can Google it, has a compendium of most mutual aid organizations around the country. Not everyone, but a lot. You should definitely be in mutual aid where you live. Make sure that even outside of those organizations, you know what's going on with your neighbors. Okay. Really good idea to know if there are people who are housing or food insecure near where you live, if there are people who need things that are dependent on the supply chain. And, you know, please stay connected to those you love and those in your own family, and make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on around you. Okay. All right. So that's it for today. I'm going to take the good news and run with it. I have to tell you guys, I have some hope. And while hope is absolutely a practice and a discipline, thank you, Mariam Kaba, as we've talked about here many times. It's also really nice to have like court victories, significant court victories in favor of due process and constitutional rights and human rights that are essentially stopping Trump's immigration, his most fascist immigration plans, like literally in their tracks. And I feel good about it. And I think we should all kind of like take the hope, okay, and run with it. Because the other thing I just have to say here, and it's funny, I was driving around yesterday. You guys will laugh at this, but I was driving around yesterday, running some errands, and I had Taylor Swift. Sometimes I just like start Taylor Swift on Apple, iTunes, Music, whatever it is, in my car, and it just runs. Like I don't even check it anymore. I just like let it run, right? And she has a song called "Everything Has Changed," and there's a line in that song which I haven't really listened to significantly. There's a line in that song that says, "Dust off your highest hopes." And I was driving around, and I was like, that is a really good line. It's also a really good line for this moment, because the thing that we can't forget is that through all this chaos and all this rubble and like the tower card in tarot, if you're into that stuff, that's like literally what we're living through. Like everything is disintegrating and we're watching things collapse. And simultaneously, some of the barriers are holding in ways that we really, really needed them to. Let's not forget that, you know, out of rubble and chaos can rise far better things than what we had before. So dust off your fucking highest hopes. That's my message for today. All right. Keep them in mind. Think about how you're going to make a better world and help people get through this. Think about how you're going to build community in ways that are healthy and loving, right? Like, let's work on that. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I will catch you all here tomorrow. There will be a bonus broadcast for our Patreon subscribers tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you want to get in on that, you got to subscribe over at Patreon. I'm also going to remind you that we have a guide available now that is in the show notes. I'm also going to drop it in the comments after the broadcast that will teach you, it's free, how to lead through this incredibly chaotic moment, how to lead and organize change where you live without burning out. Strongly recommend that you get that. It's good. I got you guys. We worked really hard on it here at the Gaia Leadership Project. I think you'll like it. And I strongly encourage you to go download it if you have not yet already done so. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to like the broadcast and subscribe. Drop me a comment if you're watching after the fact. And I will catch you all here live tomorrow at regular time. All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. And please, let's keep our chins up, okay? I'll catch you all soon. Bye.